ready? Okay, start the Finance Committee at 7 p.m. on 13th of December. Present are committee members Glassberg and Limper, council members Broussard, Gilchrist, Heenan, and Scarl, Mayor, Finance Director, Special Assistant to Mayor, the Economic Director, and the Service Director, and our two guests, three guests. We have three items on the agenda for this evening. The first two are not the budget, but will be the budget. So the first item is 2022-123, transfer amendment. So Director Copper,
yes. If you look at the detail line items, these are just some last things as we go through toward the end of the year. If you remember, we can't be overdrawn in our accounting line items over the budget. So we try and keep on it and do one last sweep before the end of the year. And in the area of police, on the second page of the detailed spreadsheet, we're moving materials and supplies to for gasoline for our vehicles. Corrections did not have their longevity budgeted, but he did receive longevity. He's been here a long time, so that was an oversight this year. And in Parks and Rec, they were ordering supplies for football helmets, and we were taking it out of salaries to accomplish that. In stop, there has been an uptick in officers writing the tickets, so we had to increase $5,000 for the salaries, and we took that out of contractual services, which had not used their line item. In permanent improvement, street and storm fund, the income tax collection fees needed to be increased, which is a good thing because that means, as you're well aware, our collections have gone up. And we took that out of contractual services. The general obligation bond retirement, I opted to take the Squires fees out of, for both the notes, out of the bond retirement fund rather than out of the proceeds of the note, since we were really pushing that interest rate maximum, and it would have caused the interest rate to be higher if we had to generate enough premium to pay the cost for Squires. They were more complicated notes. If you recall, we had to do them again, and we really did need a lot more times than normal because of the tenuous nature of the market. So I did increase those fees and paid them out of that line item to pay those out of there. The land and building acquisition fund, we paid the cost of the note issuance, which is the broker's fees and municipal advisors and other fees out of there for the taxable piece for Forest School. And then in Springville, they're starting to work on the ballroom flooring improvement, and they needed an additional $5,000 to keep moving forward toward the end of the year, through the end of the year. And so it's, in total citywide, it's only an increase of $44,557.
Are there questions from the committee?
You said there was money in the Springville ballroom. How did that change? Because I'm not seeing it in the document.
It's just a 5,000. We're taking it away from contractual services and moving it into ballroom floor improvements. So it's in, we're transferring within the fund. So there's no increase to the fund in total.
I believe Mr. Limpert is correct, the document we have just doesn't have that transaction.
Yeah.
The first one and the second one with descriptions instead.
Oh, you know what, I'm just, good catch, guys, cause Keith is just telling me that, it is in the detail, but it is not in the ordinance, so it needs to be in the ordinance. Sorry about that. Wait, oh, yeah, I'm just looking at that, you're right,
So we would need to amend to include that.
I mean, you can if you want, but I mean, it's a technical correct, it's a clerical error because it's in the detail that was presented with this ordinance.
Okay.
Might as well do it to be on the safe side, right?
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. So that on the police, the 36,000, that's entirely gasoline.
Yes.
And what is the, like, is the materials and supplies, the 176.9 that it's starting as is not all gas, or is it? I guess what I'm trying to understand
Oh,
is
no,
this,
there's other
how
things
much of
other
an
than
increase
gasoline,
is the
yes.
36 on what we, just trying to understand the scope of how much of an increase it was,
I think that,
proportionally.
I think it might have been more than like just the end part of the year, do you think? Cause wasn't the fuel thing broken where we couldn't do the transfer?
No.
Not that one, okay, alright. Then it is gasoline,
Okay.
and it's coming from benefits, I'm sorry, I don't know if I think I said that wrong,
Yeah, I see that.
okay. I mean, I can get you the breakdown of what all the supplies are, what the line items are within it.
I just would want
Yeah.
a general sense of proportionality, but if you don't know, that's okay.
I mean, I would think supplies are more, I mean, they have like the office type supplies, then they have, the supplies would include the vehicle equipment parts and stuff like that, and, cause that gets transferred from fleet into those line items, as well as fuel.
Excuse me, on the Parks and Recreation, are the football helmets already bought and we're
No,
paying?
they're getting ready for the field turf,
I see.
and that's one of the, programming things that they're gonna get started, so they wanna have the football helmets for them, that's my understanding.
Oh, just a note on that, I think they actually couldn't accept kids to the football program this fall because they didn't have enough helmets. So,
Oh, okay, well,
so they
maybe,
were already short, and that was causing them to cut programming for residents that were trying to participate because they were short helmets.
oh, that could be,
Yeah, I mean, this could also be for the programming as well, but
yeah,
I mean, it's a current issue that's already affected residents who wanted to participate.
And if I can add to that, it's not that they didn't have enough helmets, but they're out of date. Can only use them for so many years.
Right.
We have a ton of helmets, but they're useless.
Oh, wow.
They have to be refurbished, and most of the time it's not worth refurbishing, it's cheaper to buy a new.
Well, and I think Mr. Pinchuk said that they just wouldn't do it, Riddell wouldn't do it,
Yeah.
so.
If they're too old, they don't even.
Okay,
alright.
I had one other question.
Mr. Lambert.
Can we get just kind of a running tally then of the overall cost when we add in notes for bonds and things like that for the property acquisitions? What the net total was?
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, any other questions from council? Whether we amend in committee or just do it on the floor if it's necessary is somewhat of a moot point. Or it can go either way. Chuck's nodding his head. So I guess for the moment we won't amend, and if it flies the legal task for us to just do it as a technical fix, then go for it. If not, we'll amend it when we need to amend it. Is my recommendation. So I would move to favorably recommend 2022-123 and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Limpert. All those in favor?
Aye.
That is recommended 2-0. Next is 2022-124, Master Plans exam. We're adding a part-time position to our roster.
Yep, to Mr. Chairman, to
Yes.
the organizational chart. Thank you. Director Upton is here to discuss that with you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
On behalf of Director Schofield, I just wanted to indicate that this is mainly to reflect the org chart as it sits now, to add additional flexibility should the opportunity arise to bring the claims examiner position back in-house. Currently, we contract out the claims examiner. And it's also a function of our former building commissioner serve a dual role with the building commissioner and the master plans examiner. They're now in one way, shape, or form can be separate responsibilities, separate individuals. So more of a cleanup than anything else at this point in time.
Okay. Are there questions from committee? Are there questions from council? Okay, seeing none, I will move to favorably recommend 2022-124 and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Lippert. All those in favor?
Aye.
That is 2-0. Okay, we are back to the budget 2022-122. And I have first on my agenda, 3 minutes early, Mr. Carney.
Mr. Kelly, can you just
Yes.
seat for table?
Yes.
I can spread out.
Can you even join us at the table if that's easier for you?
No, I don't trust Chuck to have it.
Understood.
All right, I'm gonna give you a quick rundown, a summary of the different departments, and then Brian will direct all water.
Okay.
This year in fleet, you'll notice that we are not asking for a lot of big ticket items. That's because last year was a catch-up year due to COVID. Many of fleet's big asks were put on hold in 19 and 20. Streets this year in streets is like any other year, $1 million for resurfacing, $120,000 for paving markings, $80,000 for crack sealing, $60,000 for rejuvenation. Storm remains consistent with the only real increases are material due to the high increase in hardware, fittings, and pipes. Forestry has no surprises other than increase in fertilizer, which we are now doing in-house, which will be savings for the city. In building, we have changed directions, doing as much as possible in-house on projects and being more aggressive in preventive maintenance, so there is a slight increase here. We're done service. I'm Mr. Upton. I'm quiet.
As much as I'd love to be snippy back, my read of the changes is largely as Mr. Carney described. Well, let me first, are there questions from the committee? Go ahead.
I said, so Lorraine Road's getting resurfaced in 2024 or 25? Okay, so the assessment we're doing, are you ready for then being able to incorporate this one?
Absolutely.
Right. That's all I have.
So along those lines, Director Carney, do you have any sense for what we might need to do in terms of either the rain or plague projects that are upcoming in future years in terms of what we would need to, are there amounts we need to set aside in the future? What is the scale of
For
that?
preparations, well, I have no money in this budget, but that's a different fund. I mean, there's gonna be two, as we all know, major projects.
Mhm.
So, I mean, well, what's your question? I'm sorry.
One of the themes that we've been asking about is looking towards the future of setting aside funds to fund capital replacement of things as we go along. And one of those big infrastructure items obviously are our streets. With Clegg and Lorraine being large projects upcoming, just trying to understand not just next year, but what are the following years so that we don't put ourselves in a situation where we are not prepared to meet those challenges when they come up, if they're to try to get a sense for what, if anything, we would need to do in advance.
Well, I think what we're doing right now, what they've been doing before I got here, and is continuing, is $1 million. Like last year, we did 10 streets.
Right.
And this year, we have 10 streets, targeted to do. We're done 9, but then 231 was a 10th street. So this year, we project to do 10 streets, depending on how much concrete costs and et cetera. As far as putting money away from this budget, I think, if that's what you're asking, I don't see that. I think we should still worry about the solid side streets as well as the main streets.
Are we, in the past I've asked if we were, in terms of our staff, at the capacity of doing as much as we can in terms of the streets. If you had more money for materials, do you have the manpower to do more, or would doing anything beyond what is within this budget require additional staff?
Well, I requested more staff this year, but I didn't get it. But I'm getting one new staff this year. Because last year you guys let me raise the worker to foreman, so that's vacated, and I asked them, so I'm getting one more street worker this year. Or I'm not sure where we're gonna go with crew, but I would love to have a couple more in the staff. I mean, I don't think we want to do it all at once. I think we just want to work our way up to it, if at all possible.
Go ahead.
I just had a follow-up on vehicles. So this is a low year as far as equipment. Are we gonna expect a big ask again next year? Or are we still kind of at our usual sort of one or two vehicles?
I'll answer that, and I'll let Tony answer it also, if you don't mind. Last year was unsettling because we really made three years purchases. 2 years before that, COVID, everything was on hold, so that we had 3 years of purchasing. We did in 1 year basically at big ticket items. And this year, we talked about it with the administration and with both the finance director and the mayor. We're okay with where we're at getting this year, and we're not going to be going, oh, we got to make up for last year next year. We won't be saying that to you next year. You may have a big ticket item, I'm not sure, but time will tell. And we're still waiting on one truck from a year and a half ago. So the money's incurred, but it's not here. If the building's not, the truck is not in the building.
My friend, hi everybody. So what I would like to do is I would like to entertain the idea of possibly getting a salt truck in the next budget. We're not putting one in this budget. That would be a big ticket item.
And one of the reasons we're not getting a used truck this year is because we're buying 2 F-550s. And Tony, we put a liner in there for the salt, and we can use them year round. A lot of salt trucks, bigger salt trucks, are pretty much only used during snow time. So with the 2 big 550s we're getting, they're 70,000 plus each. They can be used year round. We can put a salt spreader in the back, and Tony can put a salt spreader in the back, and once winter's over, it can be used for landscaping or streets or storm.
Right. I could add to that if it's all right with you. The way we're going with the 550s, we're putting poly spreaders in the back of them. And the beds are made out of stainless steel, so they're gonna last quite a long time. So the spreaders, if we know we're gonna get a good stretch of weather, we can easily take the spreaders out of the trucks and use them as dump trucks. We have a storm coming, we can strap them in and go. So that was the idea of that.
I'm gonna ask this carefully. As we have different years with leaves falling, we have sometimes like this year, it's kind of all at once. Other times it's more even. Are we gradually increasing our capacity of at least within in-house being more flexible of being able to assist on that if there's a need like this year when it's more of an all at once as opposed to a more gradual.
In talking with the mayor, I want our own one truck. I mean, if you saw, they had 15 get trucks out there just, during that first half of November. And they weren't catching up. So, that's 2 to 3 guys in the truck. That's, 45 guys and 3 people in the truck. We don't have that. We can't do that full time now. But I would like a leaf vac in-house. And, just so like, just go on the ditches now, there's leaves in there. If you drive down Canterbury, they're done, but there's still a lot of leaves. And over on Stearns, there's a lot of leaves over there that, they don't do. And for the parks, I'd like to get one in-house and just try to curtail a little bit, bidding out and maybe see how it goes with one truck at a time. That'd be like $65,000, right?
That's correct, yes.
That's something looking towards the future. You'd be.
Well, to be honest with you, we were trying to get it this year, but we didn't get it at the time, so looking towards it. I don't mean this year's budget, I mean in 2022 I was trying to get it, but they weren't available. And so, we'll have to get one, we'll have to come back to you folks after I talk to the administration and see what happens.
So the real story is we don't have more vehicles because Tony can't get anyone to sell money.
So it's almost sadly true. What we do is we demo everything prior to the purchase, and we were able to demo them. We've been demoing them since 2020. A lot of the companies have gone out of business, and a lot of companies have lost their dealerships, and it's all because of that one word, COVID. But Kevin asked me if I would do some research. We were able to demo a couple of them. They're real nice machines. There's one available, but it's like $65,000. That's where we're at.
Are there additional questions from committee? Any additional questions from council? Mr. Scarm?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Kearney, with the plus or minus page for your service, the salt, it's listed 3 different times for the budget this year, 3 different places. Can you tell me how why is that like 3 different times?
Well, because there's our roads, and then there's county roads, and then there's state roads. And so,
Different
one of
funds
the
are
reasons?
paying for it. That's what that is. It's different funding sources.
But it's all, I'm sorry,
But it's all coming out of our salt.
yes, it's all right there, and it's all, it went up and it increased this year.
I
That's
see
also.
I see that.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
That's I don't know if you remember me talking about the revenue part of it, where it's the gasoline tax and the vehicle license taxes and stuff. It's the motor vehicle license tax fund, it's a state highway fund, which that only can be used for state routes in the city, and then the street maintenance and repair fund. So those 3 funds are what you're seeing there.
So in other words, I mean, you can put all the salt in one bin, so it doesn't matter if you use a little
Yeah,
bit more
it's just
or-
where it's purchased out of.
Thank you.
One of our, I'm not sure that this is the right time to bring up, but one of the items we had some questions about was increasing the safety of the crossing at Barton and Bradley.
Yeah,
Um,
I can write that up. So, and I just mentioned in passing to the mayor before, but it was I believe it's part of the master plan for the recreation master plan. And that is, ever since Bradley got paved 7 years ago or 6 years ago, that speed across the Barton Bradley soccer field area has become more hazardous because of the way it curves there from where Timber Trails is heading into Barton and Bradley, and the way Barton and Bradley soccer fields are set up. There's crosswalks that we've implemented, but those don't align with the parking entries. And so I'm looking at, is there something that could be implemented as part of the master plan around that walkway in that area? And so there's 2 options, right? It's like creating a sidewalk or simply doing just some paving to make it a little bit safer for people to walk between the crosswalk areas and the parking lots. So people are crossing at the point of the designated areas as opposed to, trying to cross to where the parking lots are.
We have talked about putting
Yeah.
sidewalks all the way from, all the way across there. And that's definitely something we could do in-house or something that, depending on how much we're gonna do, set up, I think it's a good idea.
But I would like to maybe look at that as part of the street resurfacing or, I don't think we have a sidewalk budget, so just part of the street budget to look at implementing that. I mean, I think it's great the mayor had added some, part-time, safety
Auxiliary police,
enforcement over there on Saturday mornings with the younger kids.
and also after practices at night.
Yeah, but in the evening, in the morning, it's kind of hazard, and I don't think we can expect for the number of days that soccer field's used, that it should be having police forces there that often. And by doing that might limit any kind of need for that, but it's certainly a safety hazard that's been brought up, and, all
For years.
of us have been there to experience it, and it's just a matter of speed. I think we had a pretty elaborate plan as part of the, kind of the rec budget that was proposed as part of the levy, but even something that we can just mitigate a little bit, I think would be valuable. So, I don't know what that cost estimate would be. That may be something we'd have to look at as part of the permanent budget and see if it can be squeezed in once we get a better idea of funding, but, that'd be something I wanted to see if it's feasible.
I'll look into it now. I'll get back to you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williamson, who is ill and not able to attend tonight, asked me about her concerned Brook Park Road, that a lot of the medians are not very visible at night. That people, when they left turn onto Brook Park from whatever routes, sometimes don't quite see where they're going. She didn't have any specifics in terms of how she wanted to remediate that, but that was something she brought up. So I'll just convey that, and
I'll look into that too.
if you have further thoughts. Mr. Scar?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just gonna bring up what I've talked about earlier in 2022 with you, Director, about Canterbury Road and the crosswalk and the S-curve there. Our engineering department back in 22 denied everything that we were kind of looking for. So can that be re-looked at with our new engineering
Definitely.
people that are coming in the first of the year? And see
They
what
have a
we can
list
do?
of things they're gonna want them to get a different set of eyes on and look at things maybe a different way. And
Thank you.
that's one, believe me, Chris, Mr. Scarl's on top of it.
Thank you.
Stephen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you add all of the multiples of requests that were denied?
Sure.
Like we have a stop sign at one end of the street and none at the other end of the street, but they're the same U-shaped street, so.
So where's that?
That one's at, one of the Kennedy Bridge Road.
Yep.
Like we put in several requests, so if you need us to do that again, we can,
Might
but
need to
I'm sure they're in the cabinet down there.
I mean, that might be, Mr. Chair, that might be an opportunity for a safety committee meeting that we just kind of regroup on some of those asks and
Yeah.
get some kind of priority on them from whether they're still existing or not.
Well, and again, the purpose of this is the
Yeah.
budgetary considerations of these things.
Right.
To some extent, I'm sure Mr. Carney can stretch things and get things done, but at some point, our collective items become more than that
Right.
capacity is. So,
But to that note, I am excited to be working with the new engineer and new set of eyes and maybe new vision. And some of these things may be a quick fix, hopefully, on some, one or two of them.
Mr. Broussard.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, back to Councilwoman Williams's concerns about medians. I don't know what the solution is, but I would agree with her. I see the signs indicating keep right. Half the time they're flattened and your crews are replacing them, and I see a lot. So I don't know if it's poor lighting or not, or if it's just poor driving or combination of both, but it seems to be happening with frequency, so.
You also speaking of Brook Park?
Brook Park primarily, yeah. So when you come out of the mall and you turn left, that one's down a lot, and then the one as you turn left onto Brook Park from Great Northern Boulevard as well, that one gets knocked down a lot. For whatever reason, just need to be a better driver, I suppose.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I mean, from a budgetary standpoint, it sounds like you need to get that new engineering group in to come up with sort of some recommendations then about those, whether it's paint markings or pavement. So I don't know if we actually haven't asked yet for him on these. I think the only thing I'm asking is pavement related to connecting a walkway on Bradley, so if there's any
Okay.
pavement things, maybe we can couple those together and see what that cost looks like. And we know that's the answer, is paving with the paving budget. I don't know how much that's gonna cost versus just the asphalt versus any kind of planning and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm asking for,
You're asking for asphalt or sidewalk, or concrete sidewalk?
I'm asking for a solution.
Okay.
I do not dictate a solution, but something that would allow safe walking, connecting walkways
I got it.
where parking is, so people can cross in the right spot.
I'm fairly certain I know the answer to this, but the Great Northern Bridge project is gonna be covered by Mr. Upton, even though it's in your budget.
Some of the things in my budget are probably answered by other people.
Okay.
I like volunteers.
Any further questions from council?
I have a question.
Oh, please do.
So, Mr. Carney, you were saying that you don't think that you could work better, your guys could work better with more staff? How many guys do we have working on the road?
We have 10.
We have 10.
on crew.
How many
But-
do you
but
think
some of
would
them
be
are-
better?
Some of them are committed to building, and so it's hard to ask them. It depends on a lot of things, like what projects we're working on. I mean, the guys are very outgoing, they're very hard workers, and I can't say that. But across the board, it would be nice to have one or two more.
Okay. Good to know.
Thank
Mhm.
Any other questions for Mr. Carney? Okay, I think Mr. Blum, if you have anything on wastewater?
We're in the full budget hearing, so
As in most people.
So we are projected to finish 2022 5% under budget. We always like to try to finish under budget because sometimes the revenue comes in at less than what we anticipated. And hopefully that's not the case this year, but if it is, that 5% should be able to absorb it. So we're budgeting purely against what our expected revenue is for 2023. We are an independent fund, we're not part of the general fund, just as a reminder to the new council people. So we're budgeting against a fixed number of anticipated revenue. And the budget is broken down into several categories: administrative, treatment plant, the lab, maintenance, and then collections. As a reminder, the collections is only billed out to North Olmsted residents. We only provide collection service to North Olmsted residents. All the other services are provided to North Olmsted residents, Olmsted Township residents, and Fairview Park Ward 5 residents. So there are some slight changes in comparison to last year and this year. As far as the staffing goes, we anticipate only the one conversion of a part-time person into a full-time person. That's the pretreatment biosolids coordinator. We do anticipate some staff turnover beyond that. We have a couple people that are retiring this upcoming year. That should impact overtime, specifically in the treatment line item. But those new employees will hopefully, they have no vacation time when they start, so that'll decrease overtime later in the year, and hopefully we'll have a net non-increase of overtime. The rest of the staffing should remain consistent for the year, and so there aren't really any large increases in the staffing line items across the board, other than the anticipated 2.5% increase. 2.5% increase, which was negotiated by the CBA. Other than that, there are some ups and downs in the 53 line item, which is material supplies. Some of those are adjustments because this past year was a very dry year, and we artificially kept some numbers high, like electricity, polymer, things like that, because the wetter the weather, the higher the flows, the more of those materials we use. For the 54 group, kind of the same thing. We're kind of in a weird place as far as the engineering goes. Not only do we have a new engineering firm starting up, but we also have a big project in the works with the South Interceptor. That's not part of this budget. It's being funded by anticipated DEFA loan from Ohio EPA. And then the 55 group is very variable from year to year. We have no big vehicles in this upcoming year. We do have a small SUV, which is the pre-treatment vehicle that's been added in, and some various smaller items, which we tend to do in the years that we don't have a big vehicle purchase. We tend to rotate our vehicles out on an 8-year basis. A lot of that has to do with the fact that we only keep one of our major vehicles, like the vac truck and one of the camera trucks, so we squeeze our other vehicles in kind of where we can fit them into the other years. We do have a 5-year plan, which was submitted to the finance department, and the majority of our stuff is basically replaced on an age or hours basis. And so we plan accordingly and budget accordingly. So if the council members have additional questions, I can certainly field them at this time.
Questions from committee? Ms. Walker?
Yeah, I just wanna make sure, so we don't have any in that 5-year plan, we don't have an anticipated large capital costs upcoming, and we certainly don't expect to have to bond any capital outlays in the near future.
Well, we're doing the EQ basin, where we're getting OWDA loans. So when we get the cost estimates, the final cost estimates in, then we'll apply for the loan, and then we'll have the resources to then be able to appropriate as we're going out to bid for the project. So it'll go into this budget, so there will be a big capital outlay, but that's by getting paid for by loans.
Okay.
And then additionally, we anticipate these costs ahead of time, and then we budget them into the rate study. So the previous rate study, we anticipated $4 million worth of this project going towards that. And then we also have a long-term plan for projects like replacing the force main on One Clegg Road, which runs from Laverne, and then the other project that we kind of have in the works down the road is the replacement of the main interceptor coming down the hill on Shepherd's Lane. Those are things that we'll address if we need to. That money that we save every year can go towards these projects. But if we need to, if we want to push them back, they can be incorporated into the next rate study as a capital improvement project. The capital improvement projects like the South Interceptor tank, those are not part of the budget that we produce every year, but they all come out of the same revenue that the taxpayers the ratepayers are paying to us.
So my question with that, Harry, is, so we're increasing the bond retirement fund by 900,000. Is that per schedule?
That's from, if you recall, that's for the sanitary purpose of Spruce.
Okay, so that's here.
That's to pay off that note, that 900.
Okay, so right, that we talked about. So that's here.
Their debt service is there's one small bond that's still outstanding. It's pretty small, and then the rest of it is all the 2013 and 15 OWDA loans and notes.
Okay, so that 900,000 is for the Spruce. Okay,
correct.
All right, thank you. That answers my question.
So my question is the sewer revenue appears to have increased fairly substantially this year, or is projected to increase substantially. What's going on with that, or how is that happening?
Hold on. I don't think it's going up that much, but
Maybe I'm misreading this, but it
yeah.
appears that it's going up 13.
While Carrie's looking up the answer, I can tell you simply that the sewer revenue is based off of the water meter usage. So it can fluctuate from year to year, and if people are using more in a given year, more water that is, we're gonna see a higher generation of revenue. So people's habits, are they taking longer showers? Are they flushing the toilet more often? We do get several calls per month on ways to conserve water or lower their bills. But I haven't been receiving a lot of them this year, so I'm assuming that things are kind of proceeding normally. Carrie may have an answer for it. The revenue, we did have a rate increase this past year. Whereas the first 3 years of the rate study, we held it at 0. And then this year we actually did have a 2%, I think, increase in the rates.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be reflective of that as well.
And it's projected to go up 2% for 2023 for North Olmsted ratepayers. But no, it doesn't, like the budgeted of this year is 10.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna go up to 10.2 because the odd thing that is incredible is that as the rates go up, usage does tend to go down. People are just, with more efficient toilets, maybe they're not watering and they don't, watering their grass and they don't have separate meters and things like that. As the rates go up, people tend to look at that. So even though it goes up, doesn't go, you usually don't benefit that whole 2%.
Okay. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what I'm looking at because I see us going from 10.2 to 11.7 for the budget. But maybe it's something about the accounting I'm not understanding. On a different topic, Mr. Bowman, you mentioned Clegg and that new I don't know. Force main.
Yeah.
Just tell a little bit about that, what that is, or how that interacts with the Clegg Road.
Sure. So everything north of Lorraine Road flows by gravity towards the border with Westlake. And then it goes to a central lift station, and there's 4 of them, and the lift station pumps it back up to Lorraine Road, where it then flows by gravity to the treatment plant. That pipe that's pressurized that pumps the flow back up to Lorraine Road is called a force main. And the force main has had major breaks in it, not this past year, but the previous 2 years before that, 1 each year. The first year we paid, I can't believe it was Fabrizi or Trex or somebody to excavate it out for us and make the repair. We learned a lot during that repair. We repaired the second one ourselves in-house. Both times we were chasing the leak, which is excavating from the point where it comes out of the ground to the point where the break occurs. And we exposed that pipe and we saw a lot of pitting and a lot of corrosion that really shouldn't be there. We don't know if there's acidity in the soil or a stray electric current or something that's causing it to pit out. But it's a concern for future breaks. And the other unique thing about that particular force main is that it's right along the edge of the road. So right now it's very easy to service. If that road gets changed, widened, expanded, the lane gets put in, we're gonna find ourselves potentially in the roadway now, which makes it more complicated to repair. The thing that we're thinking of doing, if we replace that force main, especially if we do it early, we'd like to put a new force main under where the existing sidewalks are. That gets it out of the conflict of the other utilities. It's an easy thing for residents to buy off on because they'll be getting a new sidewalk out of it. There's also some talk about maybe a bike trail in the future, so that might cause us to pull the trigger on this early. We'd like to get that done so we're not having to dig and excavate over a brand new road. So these are all things that are we're looking at in the future, planning for in the future. so we can get this thing done. The nice thing about the force main replacement is we'll put the new line in, and then when the new line is in, we'll put it in service, and the old one we can abandon, we don't have to excavate it out. So it can just sit there and do whatever old pipes do in the ground.
But you didn't hear it from me.
So in a nutshell, that's the project. So, and it is something that can be addressed in 2027, or if we need to pull the trigger on it earlier, we can. So.
My last question, and then I'll reopen again the rest of councils. We have, as the city, the right to purchase the remaining school properties that are going to come offline. Which or any will those become part of the 5-year plan, just as Spruce has in terms of potential additional sites, or are we more set, or I guess I'm asking for any guidance or general things council should know about that moving to the future?
Yes, I mean, so the reality is we're probably not going to build another one of these EQ tanks. If we do a major project in the future as far as the collection system is concerned, and this is many years down the road, I think there's some room to expand at the existing Clegg Park. We have 1.5 million gallons out there. We do occasionally still have an SSO out there. We could probably benefit from another 500,000. But this is really so into like, is the weather going to continue to get worse? Is it going to get better? Who knows what's going on? And the nice thing about that, not that any SSO is good, that's a sanitary sewer system overflow. That flows right into Fairview, and it's got a nice channel where nobody's going to touch it or play in it or get involved in it. Maybe some kayaker doing some kind of crazy stuff on YouTube, but other than that, no. So that's a good. We have to have an SSO. We have to have a place to discharge the water into, where it's not going to cause flooding downstream, and the water that's now contaminated is ending up in people's basements. So that's where we could make an improvement in the future. I don't anticipate us doing it at the school. That being said, there's room for stormwater improvements, and we'll certainly have a lot of input from the mayor, the future engineering department, planning and development director over there, the service director, and I'll probably be providing some input myself as far as what types of improvements we can make to keep people's yards, basements, streets, and stuff from flooding. And that's really where we're going to be, I think, focusing in the future.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for large open-ended questions. Any other questions from council?
I just have one quick.
Mr. Scarlett.
Thank you. Mr. Bloom, you just mentioned in the beginning of your statements, you say 5% on this budget.
Correct. That's what we anticipate.
Can you give me a rough dollar amount for that?
$500,000. Our budget currently is around 10, so we're anticipating about $500,000.
Thank you.
And last question. When do all those bonds get paid off for the wastewater plant? How many years from now?
35 and 37, I think.
2035 and 2037?
I'll call you from retirement and remind you.
Oh yeah, I'll get it.
The nice thing about those bonds or loans from DFAR, they are lower percentage, so we're not paying a crazy amount of interest on them.
Right.
They're a revolving fund for the state of Ohio.
Okay. Mr. Upton, I believe you're next. Thank you, service.
Thanks, Mr. Columbus. A tough act to follow there.
Segue for you there. Yeah, please. You're easy. We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a brief overview, highlights of the budget, and noting some particular line items that might be of interest to this committee. Starting first with outside services, you'll notice a fairly substantial increase in that particular line item. That is due to the fact that by charter, we're required to conduct and adopt a master plan every 10 years. That exercise will begin next year and roll into the following year. And typically master plans are fairly expensive endeavors. The Lorraine Road corridor study, which is just a corridor-wide study, was around $140,000, so we anticipate that the master plan study would be somewhere in that same vicinity. So that accounts for that particular increase. The next increase that you'll see of note is a rather substantial increase. It is our intent to create a quarterly two-page paper mailer that will get sent to every resident as to what's going on in the community and what they can expect over the next quarter or so. That is what accounts for both the printing as well as the postage increase. There's some things such as when leaf pickup's going to start, notable events in the spring, messages from council, mayor, relevant department heads, highlighting the goings on of the city and things that residents need to be aware about. We know a lot of our residents are older, may not have social media, maybe they prefer that paper newsletter, so we want to get back to sending a newsletter out to the residents. Also of note, there is a bit of an increase in the meetings and seminars as well as the dues. I really believe in professional development and availing the opportunities for staff to continue to stay up to date on relevant training. And so that accounts for the increase in the meetings and seminars. The dues, we are now members of the Ohio Economic Development Association as well as the American Planning Association, and hopefully soon to be members of the North Olmsted Chamber of Commerce. I just think it's good to be members of our local chamber. So that accounts for those particular increases. On the local fiscal recovery, a lot of these are anomalies because you'll see there's no expenditure previous or future. Those are all American Rescue Plan Act funded initiatives. The first of which is the residual that's left over from the economic development plan is one we're invoicing. It has to be done to have that final plan paid out. We will come to council with that final document and present our findings here in the next few weeks, probably after the first of the year. The $75,000 is initially part of the demolition of Forest Elementary. The other $327,000 under land improvements is the excess that is also for the demolition of Forest. There's professional services related to environmental due diligence, market studies, and all those sorts of things. And all of that will carry down and fund the demolition after that work is done. And then moving down to, the $152,501, that is digital government and digitizing commercial zoning files and other stuff that was previously authorized by council under the American Rescue Plan. A lot of that stuff falls underneath my department's charge. Moving on to boards and commissions, we anticipate onboarding new board members. Increase there is just to pay for their name placards and those sorts of things. We've reduced some line items to be more in line with historical expenditures of those particular line items. I will note that there is something omitted in error, and we'll need to add to the permanent budget the $20 for the community council dues was omitted in error, so that'll need to be added back to the permanent budget once it gets passed. And then, Mr. Chairman, the last thing of note here, the engineering budget comes with a very large caveat. We are in the final steps of negotiating a contract with Sugar Valley Engineering, and we don't have those numbers final, so the engineering budget, these numbers are largely placeholders until that contract is solidified and finished, so that will be amended in the permanent budget as well. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, any questions I'm having?
Thank you. questions from Mr. Butler?
Yeah, what are the benefits of joining the Ohio Economic Development Association? Or we always, it sounded like that was a new membership.
Correct. Well, because the city is undertaking economic development in-house, it provides access to networks and resources and seminars that economic development practitioners can take advantage of and avail ourselves to resources that non-members don't have access to. Recently, I attended the Ohio Economic Development Summit, where I was connected with, among other things, Amazon's economic development representatives, and had a lot of conversations regarding the Amazon grocery store that is coming to New Homestead at the end of next year. So it's a really good network. It's a really good resource for the community to be able to leverage.
Do we know if before we used to have these services consulted, so I assume those were,
Pardon me?
we used to have these economic development as a consultant service, right? So I assume then that was something that they were a member of, and
I would assume that Mr. Myers,
yeah,
running his own firm, would have been part of that
Yeah.
organization. I have no way of knowing for
Okay.
certain.
all right, thank you.
So, Mr. Upton, can you give us some idea of with the engineering change? We had previously more of a lower, if I'm categorizing this right, lower minimum, but had a lot of additional costs added in throughout the year. How does this change compare to that?
You're spot on in your observations, Mr. Chairman. The contract that I'm working with Director Garreau in negotiating on behalf of the city is a lot more robust. Part of, if you'll remember, during your committee meetings when we were talking about the RFP, the goal was to clearly define the scope of services so that there was more included within the basic services, and less was outside of the scope and therefore subject to a pre-negotiated hourly rate. There's a lot of things in the new contract, for example, I don't quite, Mr. Blum's gone, but NPDES, it is a national pollutant eliminating something.
Discharge.
Yep, thank you. So that was outside of the basic scope of services, and we were paying an hourly rate for that. That is now within the scope of services and part of the retainer. Them supporting our grant applications, right? Outside of the old contract, inside of the new contract. FEMA floodplain administration, same thing. There's a lot of things that we're clearly defining so that our staff know exactly what we're getting in this. So the retainer may be a little bit higher, but it's also hedging on the fact that we're not going to have so many one-offs and projects that are outside of the basic scope of services and subject to that hourly rate. Because like I had said in your committee, we pay Bowen $72,000 a year in retainer, and over a 5-year period, we pay them $1.9 million. So I'm not a mathematician, but 72,000 times 5 is not $1.9 million. It's a lot of money. We're hedging against that, and that's why I don't have final numbers right now. Because we've really done a lot of work on making sure we nail down the scope.
Very good. Are there any updates to, because I poked Mr. Carney about this earlier, about the Great Northern Bridge? Is that within the same cost scope we previously talked about? Is that on track?
So it is on track. Cost, no. We had originally anticipated right in and around $500,000, but we're due to all of the economic factors, supply chain, oil and gas costs. The preliminary estimate we got is a little bit higher. but we have all of the resources we need, and it's all coming out of the TIF fund to fund it. We are due to have a tracing submittal to ODOT at the end of the month, and the contract sale date is April, that's when it gets bid by ODOT. So what'll happen is ODOT will say, here's the base scope, here's what you guys wanna do, and the difference is what we'll be responsible for at the end of the day.
What other uses would we normally use those TIF funds for?
It's fairly broad, so it is a TIF that is written where you can do anything from landscaping to a whole new bridge and basically anything in between. So it's previously been used to improve Country Club Boulevard. Our TIF attorneys had provided us an opinion that allowed us to study Lorraine Road and its future. And so it principally, it has to reasonably benefit the TIF parcels within the district, and that's basically the Great Northern Shopping Center area. So, and it's public infrastructure improvements, so anything above ground or below ground that is public infrastructure. And this body is the body that determines what constitutes public infrastructure.
Okay.
Just clarification, are we able to leverage that TIF for not only, obviously we did for the Great North Country Club project, but are we allowed to use it for maintenance of that road too? Or does it have to be like a full capital expenditure?
So yes, you could, but maintenance to a certain extent, that's a cost benefit analysis maintain versus. But what you have to understand is that TIF is still in place until 2042. It's a 30-year TIF that was put in place in 2012. Even with the downturn in the mall's valuation, it's still, revenues still exceed expenditures. It doesn't exceed it by what it used to. I believe our debt service is $303,000 a year, and typically we've historically brought in between $400,000 and $500,000. This year's a little bit different because there was a refund because of the valuation change in the mall. But moving forward, we'll still have revenue to still exceed expenditures as best we can reasonably predict.
So is this fund one of the resources we would look to if we did a large project around the nature of the mall, or the zoning of the mall changed dramatically, and public investment was part of that change?
Absolutely. And there's nothing to say that the TIF can't be extended, right? Flats East Bank, I'm certainly not saying that this is ever something we should entertain, but that particular TIF was extended to be a 70-year TIF, believe it or not. Yeah, anytime we could look at and reasonably predict property valuation increase in the future, TIF is a good idea to contemplate, to leverage that to do public infrastructure improvements and investment.
Okay. Any questions from council? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Elton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I believe what Chuck is doing is grabbing Ms. Lumber from our IT department.
Okay.
Welcome. How are you? Hi. So, thank you for joining us. One of the topics that we've had a lot of questions on and a lot of interest around is planning for the future. And one of the areas historically in the budget that's had a lot of year-to-year variances is the IT and computer area. It appeared this year that we didn't have a lot going towards the capital replacement of stuff, more on, I forgive my ignorance here, the box, the Barracudas, the subscription stuff. And so one of the things we wanted to understand was looking to the future, next year, 3 or 5 year, what is our outlook for that because some of our subscriptions and those services seem to have grown quite a bit in the last couple of years, and understanding how we crowded out the computer replacement budget, so to speak.
So, if I can jump in real quick, I did, and I don't have a printout now, but I did email everybody on Saturday the computer replacement schedule. But then you guys should, you guys should have a sheet that Eric will walk through here in a minute to kind of talk about the subscription stuff. So that way you can follow along with this.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. Yeah, so we are starting the process, and I think one of the key pieces, what we did in the past was to upgrade all the computers across the organization at the same time. And while we did succeed at doing that, there were a few departments that were upgraded a little bit before some of the other departments. So we kind of took a step back and looked at what the asset tags were, as well as the devices that were the oldest, and then we started to create more of a timeline for the asset updates across the organization, breaking it down by different departments. And what I did list there was more of what the timeline looked like based on which departments were scheduled to start the upgrade process. And I believe majority of that is going to start in 2024 and go through 2025, 2026. The main idea is to have the devices upgraded every 3 to 5 years to remain consistent and to remain with today's technology standards based on the ever-changing world of technology, so to speak. Were there any particular questions that anybody had based on some of what that schedule looked like?
Mr. Chair. Can you clarify the estimated annual license fees versus the actual? Is that as if you take it at an average per year on estimate? Just explain the difference between these two real quick.
Yeah, basically the estimate versus the actual. When we go to get budgetary quotes for the upcoming year, we are utilizing a specific number of licenses. In reality, not all the time will those licenses carry over. We may be higher, we may be lower. So for instance, our capture client or our hosted email security, are based on 300 user licenses or 400 endpoints or something like that. Those numbers will fluctuate based on the amount of devices that we have, in production at that time. So there will be potentially an updated price or a decreased, higher price or lower price based on the total number of licenses that we actually purchase when we do the purchasing process, instead of just budgetary numbers based on, stuff that we're putting in today. And some of this is historical versus what we've been paying over the course of the last few years. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but our estimates are half of what we actually ended up paying.
Well, and some of it too, though, is based on if you see the subscription length. So what you see there from a subscription length, it'll be based on. So, for instance, the Box Cloud platform, that's a 3-year license, and we're paying $105,000 a year. We paid $105,000 this past year. We pay $105,000 the following year, and then the sequential year after that, and then our contract is up. So overall, we're paying $315,000, but in reality, we're paying $100,005 over the course of 3 years. That's where that number comes from.
So this is the total, the gross. The actual annual is gross.
Correct.
But it's not really an actual annual license fee then.
It can be at times, because some of it, like the Box email security, we got into a 3-year agreement with them, and Carrie opted to pay the $58,500 all up front. So we will no longer have to pay a license subscription fee for this coming year and then the following year.
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to see then is some kind of chart that shows us the average annual cost in licensing, which would basically say, you know, it wouldn't show the 5,800, it would show the single year cost, and we could look at that
Yeah.
trending over time to see
Right.
what is the average cost, and then
And,
Yeah,
and
what
majority of that
happens
will be
licenses
estimated based on the first column. So for instance, the box email security, you can expect to pay around $19,500 per year. Or $58,500 over the course of 3 years.
so our annual licensing cost right now is about $300,000 per year,
That is correct.
and then everything else is just accounting of which year we pay it in.
That is correct. The number down at the very bottom there, plus or minus an estimated 15%
Okay.
change increase.
So I think, I mean, I personally would like to see that every year of here's what the average
Okay.
license cost is, so we can see,
And creating this spreadsheet
yeah,
moving forward for the next year, we'll be able to say, okay, here's what we paid for, here's what we estimated this licensing is going to be, here's what our actual costs were for 2023, and then as we prepare the 2024 budget, you'll kind of start to see that historical data.
yeah, cause then we'd like to see like a 3-year average annual cost, right? And then you could see,
Sure.
here's what it was over the last 3 years, and as licenses roll over, you can start to get a trend of,
Right.
you know, we are now 50, the way these things go, 50% higher than what we were 5 years ago in an annual basis. So even if the numbers double or something, we know it's really 50%.
And realistically, you know, we're moving more toward a subscription-based model, you know, from IT perspective. We're not purchasing software and sitting on it for 5 to 8 years. We're trying to stay kind of ahead of the curve, you know, with technology and taking that idea and that premise into the 3 to 5 year life cycle as well. And most everything, as I'm sure most everybody knows, is more subscription based. They want to, you know, kind of lock you in for software for that year and not have you purchase something like Microsoft Office, let's say, which we did purchase about 5 years ago. And I put some information in here about Microsoft licensing, and we're going to start relicensing that back in 2024. Now, as we prepare for 2024, I'll start talking about Office 365 and what it looks like if we went a subscription model versus if we paid, you know, a capital expense and amortize it over 5 years or something like that. And so that's kind of where we're starting to go.
Yeah. And I think those are strategic decisions that, you know, the finance director can make, but we're gonna have to see, like, per year, how much are we growing, and that's where we've struggled. Because there's been, and that would be from a licensing perspective, and then from a capital perspective, right, of however long that platform is, it should be appreciated over time.
But is this a good start for what you wanted?
This gives us an idea, so next year, if it comes in and this number of per year is 450, then we say, all of our licensings, like, what else did we buy, or how did these jump up $150,000 over the course of a year? Okay. That answered my question.
So the capital side, what would you describe as our, if we were doing similar in terms of the
Well, I think
annual cost?
I think that would be, any platform probably has a specific warranty period or then life cycle period, right, of whatever that server or things like that, and then aren't those things just depreciated over time or something, like amortized, or?
No, I mean, I get that, but I mean, for example, you've looked at this, we're talking about that as a roughly $300,000 a year annual expense. What is the equipment side, the computer, the capital side is also a number.
Well, you have a life cycle management plan, right? So however long that's gonna be, you take that total cost and you average over the expected life cycle of that.
And we can do the same thing as we start to prepare for the asset refresh, the life cycle refresh. So next year we might have the same kind of idea with the hardware side of it, because we're not doing any hardware, and we haven't done any hardware in the last couple of years.
Yeah, because if you bought, $50,000 worth of computers, but you expect they're going to be a 3 to 5 year life cycle, then you're taking the average of those numbers of PCs by 50,000, and that's your hardware cost per year. I mean, you obviously are still gonna have to do whatever you need to do to manage it per year because you're deciding how you wanna pay for it. But like, that gives us a trend of what is our real asset cost of IT and what is our licensing cost of IT, your average per year.
And volume.
And volume, yeah.
And we're developing an inventory system through Munis too that will give us not only components, because as we provide new workstations, computers, etc., we will take some of those that may not be the oldest and have those as part of our refresh fleet. So as we're refreshing devices for, maybe the building department or the police department or fire department, we still want them to be able to be functional and working, and or have spares that are available, should something happen, during that time. We account for having spares on the shelf, so to speak, too, so we can fix and repair and make sure that we don't have, much of a dead period if something were to happen to any of these devices.
Yeah. I guess the only other question I had was on cell phones. Those are under your budget, right?
Well, I've been working on it a little bit. The first thing I want to tell you is that the cell phones, that bill and that line item also includes tablets and surfaces and things like that. Anything that has a cell phone charge every month. Mm-hmm. And like, not all of them have it. Like, I just use it for Wi-Fi. I don't have that. So it's more than just cell phones. That's the first thing I want to tell you.
The bigger majority of it is the MDTs for police and fire that are outfitted within the vehicles, and all those have monthly cellular coverage and LTE chips built into them for accessibility.
Yeah, I guess our question was more outside of police, fire, safety, and it was just in other departments, like the line items weren't really aligning to the costs. Like one department would have 2 people, and it would be $3,800, and then another department would have 3 people, and it was like 2,000. So it was
that was because we weren't taking into account tablets and services. Okay. And so I am looking at it. I just got the bill today, so I'm looking at it line by line. But it's
one universal plan, right?
It is.
Yes. Yeah. Correct. And we all share minutes and all that stuff.
One of the things I talked with, I had a meeting with Eric and Doug today, a little bit with IT. As I told you, one of the things we wanted to do is get a handle on our cell phones, and it was something we're working on. But as talking with them, like, they have been watching stuff, and if they notice that there's a department that has a cell phone and it's not being used and it's gone on 2-3 months, they're going down and asking why, and if it's not being used, they're eliminating it from the system. So they are also currently, while we're trying to get a handle on the whole thing, system-wide, they are watching as stuff comes in. If things aren't being used, if they have a data plan that's not being used, they're eliminating the data plan.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense. I mean, I think they did a good job getting everything under one plan, and then things have evolved over the last decade that pricing may be different, and we're still with the same carrier. Maybe there's some other benefit. I don't know.
Well, we talked about that a little bit today as well. Like, right now, we're on Verizon for everything. We're on Verizon because of police and fire, what they need to be for their emergency network. But we talked about, like, one of the things I want to know, and I think the mayor wants to know, is does it make sense for everything to be on Verizon, or does it make sense to only have police on Verizon and everyone else on AT&T or T-Mobile? But as we remove stuff from Verizon network, charges makes some of the discounts we get go up. So we have to do an analysis on that, on whether it makes sense to keep everything on Verizon and look at other options.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah, I appreciate you guys looking at that, or just get a better understanding of things weren't really adding up. But I see why not.
And just to let you know, the last 12 months, it's $45,800 citywide.
Okay.
But like the building department, all the inspectors have cell phones and surfaces, and and service foremen have cell phones and surfaces. So it's cost of doing the cost of doing business these days.
And it's greatly enhanced productivity too, because they're able to do all right then and there.
I would also wonder whether they, like, long term, do they need both, or could we look at equipment that there's a reasonable sized tablet that allows them to do their job and also can be serving as a phone with Bluetooth or something?
Well, and that's where we have some of the other capabilities with the surfaces. So once we start loading and pushing down our ShoreTel, MyTel application for our phone system, we can run those soft phones, so to speak, software-based phones on our devices.
Yeah.
And for a long period of time before I took over, there were multiple devices, like building department had a PC and they had, you know, a tablet of some sort. So as we've gone through the first initial phase of the desktop refresh, we've consolidated all the devices and made each device only a singular device for all users, but made them portable if they had to have the portability included within. Plus it ties into some of our disaster recovery plan too, in case something happens, more of the decision makers and some of the team members that we have that service a required function for us on a daily basis. It gives them a little bit more portability and we can basically set up a operation anywhere.
All right, those are my questions, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Are there other questions from council? Okay, looks like you're done.
All right, great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
So, changing gears a little bit, Director Hopfer had a kind of a technical question. In this budget, there are a number of items that were classified as ARPA budget things that are included in here. There was some the money that we did not spend on council chambers and whatnot. If we were to spend that money, is that a completely separate budget again? Is that an amendment to this budget? I understand we have to fulfill the requirements of the uses of the ARPA money, but what is the vehicle that is done through? If I'm making sense.
I guess it depends on what you're using it for. If you're using it for capital equipment type stuff, then it doesn't have to go through readings in 30 days. If it's capital infrastructure, then it would. You have to do that. So you can add it to this budget if you want to, because you've already stated the broad purposes. If you're using it for that purpose anyway. If it's still council related, or are you going to be doing it for something else?
I don't know. I'm trying to get a sense for what resources are available, if there are things that we want to, if there are projects, items we want to fund. Is that one of the sources of funds that's potentially available? And if so, does it go through this budget, or does it go through a separate process?
It can go through this budget if you choose to. Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't have to be a formal presentation. But there is, thank you for reminding me, there's not really a lot of capital infrastructure in this budget. There's only a few things. So as always, we want to present the whole budget to you, but when we do the amendments to this line, we're going to have a separate line item to move out those capital infrastructure items and put them in a capital improvement ordinance that'll have to go through readings in 30 days. So this can pass immediately, but that's a formality.
On a similar note, there's a number of, especially in the plus or minus 15%, there's a number of items that say this doesn't need to be here, or there's extra money, you know, it's too much, it's too little, whatever. What is the timeline for us kind of inventorying that list? Because that
actually
appears to make some kind of impact on how much, what's available in terms of funds.
He did do that already. Of course, if I can find it. But you have that, right? And we can send that to you. Or do you want us to print it out and give it to everybody? Oh, here it is. Here it is. I don't know what, this is just, there was something tonight, I think, that won't be on there, but.
It was $20.
Yeah, give them the $20 for we don't have to change it. But this is just, Keith went through and moved all the things that, so it looks just like the ordinance, it'll be the amendment. So there's $176,000 for the general fund, and remember I'm increasing the revenues for interest income for that. Would you want me to make a copy of this for everybody, and I can do it right now, I mean, it's not a big deal. Actually, B probably could do it quicker, cause I have been luck with copies. Yeah, you and Donna, I heard that thing.
I guess what I'm, as much as anything, trying to understand is how does it leave the fund balances? The ramifications of all the changes, what are the fund balances?
Okay, I haven't put it into that fund balance spreadsheet,
Right.
but, the only one that was at risk was the general fund. Cause Springvale was mostly decreases, correct? Oh, and one other thing, you asked me to look at electricity line item for recreation.
Yeah.
That's way over. It should be 50,000 less. So, I'm sorry about that. We were so worried about not having enough in line items that we focused on that more than the over one, so that one is definitely, we can reduce that 50.
So
I think that all the funds are in better or the same shape.
So I guess what I'm driving at is for us to have as much of a sense as we can of what's available. The starting document that we have has the general fund with $4,500 in it at the end of the year. So that's not much breathing room, and would normally suggest that if something goes in, something has to come out. And so to whatever extent that is not the case, it's helpful to know, is that a 50,000, is that 300,000, what is the?
Well, it was 4,500, I mean, I'm just using round numbers, 4,500. The document I just gave B had 176, 335 or something like that of increases. And then I have 180,000 in interest income that I said I could raise it. So it's $8,000, maybe $8,500 fund balance.
So that's inclusive of all the changes in terms of like, again, I remember the police had several items that were, this is 20,000, that is.
They had a duplicate, they had a,
right. So the net outcome of all of those things is the 176.
Yes, in the general fund.
In your spending in the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Does that include that EMS? Or are we just accounting that? in the
Mayor,
reserve?
do you wanna speak to the fire truck or the fire engine?
So the fire engine that was in discussion on Saturday, the issue with that is the amount that it has gone up to, over the last few years. So remind me, Director, the last time we bought an engine that was similar was 2012?
2012 was a pumper truck
Okay.
for $325,000. And in 2002, we bought a Pierce engine truck. And I don't know the difference between engine and pumper, but they look about the same size, that's all I can tell you. And if you, inflation, which has been relatively mild, and then I added 20% on this last year to the Pierce engine, so I'm comparing apples to apples. I come up with like $778,000 for a truck, I think is what and they're asking, $950 they're estimating, and they haven't really started any of their detailed process of what should be on the truck and what should, and I would rather them sketch it out and get exactly what we want and what we need. And then we can come back to council, and I feel it'll be within the EMS fund range, so we don't have to go out to borrow for it.
So, and the numbers that the chief had gotten to the administration was that looking at the end of this year, so within the next few weeks, the current price for that engine is approximately $811,000. And then in the spring, there's an estimate that it would go up to $852,447. So that's the estimate that they've received from the that company that they in Rocky River, I guess, had also purchased a similar engine this year. So that's where.
Theirs was 773. So 950 estimate was high, and I think that's why we questioned it. And so they're doing their due diligence and
So it's
getting
out,
their due
so it's
diligence.
not currently in the budget, we'll look at that.
No, but we feel like we'll
It would
be
be
there,
reserved.
and probably in the permanent one.
Okay.
So 811 now, another 45,000 if we wait for the spring.
The spring being after the permanent in January.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
it's only gonna go up, it's never going down, let's face it. I don't see these prices going down.
Well, I'm just trying to clarify, if we don't do this now, if we wait until the permanent in January, we
Well,
would still have the option of that benefit, or is that wrong?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You know, they have, it's not like January 1 is all the new pricing. It's like when the new models come in, and so everything is different in the new pricing. So I don't know the answer to spring. Does that mean March? Does that mean April, May?
Yeah.
So, we'll get better details, but we feel like, I mean, we're not gonna wait until March to do this permanent budget. We're doing it as soon as the books are closed and we're ready, so we think we'll be there in time.
Okay. I guess I'll ask both committee and the group as to how we want to proceed in terms of, do we want to discuss more about individual changes? Do we want to get a further handle on any items? We have some information requests we've made that are not quite done yet. But we have until the actual 20th, that is still our vote night, to, in theory, make some amendments or changes. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, my thought on this is, from the temporary budget perspective, that we have some outstanding items that I think would wanna get answered, but I wouldn't hold up the temporary budget, but I would think that those would be on the table for the permanent budget, and we need to work with the administration to try to get those ironed out before the permanent budget gets approved. I wouldn't wanna hold up there wasn't enough there. I don't feel like there's enough outstanding questions that, like, there was showstoppers that we shouldn't move forward with a temporary budget. But I think we should look at, and then hopefully we get some better solidification of December numbers and things like that, and find out what the revenue looks like for the permanent budget. Is there any room there for some of the questions we had, or is there less room, and we need to address those for the permanent budget?
Well, are you saying you want to have questions on certain things you want to take out of this?
Well, I think there were some comments here of some potential safety improvements that some of the council members mentioned that would fit somewhere potentially in the service paving budget or somewhere else in service that we didn't have good numbers on, but maybe with some dialogue with service, we could get an idea of what number might feel right to sort of mitigate some of those things.
Put that in the permanent budget.
Yeah, to put that in the permanent budget. I think there were just some general questions,
I mean,
it looks like those are getting ironed out as far as the cost over the overage and the underages, so to speak. So we'll just have to review that and make sure we're good there. What else did you have? Or is there other backlog items or?
I mean, I try to make an inventory of the items that people either make comments on or ask questions about.
Right.
Ms. Healy?
Mr. Chair, so what is your deadline for the permanent budget?
Well, it's March 31st, but that's right. It has to be passed by March 31st.
That's the ultimate, is the end of March.
Yeah, that's the ultimate deadline. I ideally want to get, the administration wants to get done earlier.
Well, right, but.
But that's the deadline, is March 31st.
Well, because I actually have a lot of questions.
Okay.
And I don't think that, you know, there are some areas in the rec center budget I'm just not happy with. And I am looking for a bigger vision and less nit-nat stuff out of that area, and I haven't even had a discussion yet about it because our director didn't even think about where we're getting a pool, how we're doing that. And if we're looking at now the possibility of setting funds aside in you know, the scope of we're gonna build a fund towards something, I certainly would like that to be included because, you know, for 10 years our pool's been a life support system, hour by hour, week by week. So I'd like to know where something like that is, with also the computers and some of these big items. That's all.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
As far as the pool goes, I understand where you're coming from and wanting a plan, and I think that the administration is working toward a overall rec plan. I think they have ideas of it, and there's money in the budget to move a planning process forward. Maybe take some things that have already been planned out and put to paper and submitted together collectively. But we're not gonna be able to squirrel away $10 million. Like, and if I made,
You know,
if I let you think that, I'm sorry.
No.
I mean, I'm all for putting money away for things, but we're never gonna be able to save that.
I'm
So-
looking for 10 million
Yeah.
bucks, okay, nobody's
Well-
looking for that, so stop.
So there would have to be a funding plan associated with any project like that.
I understand the comment, but as of right now, it's, in terms of the income tax revenue we have right now, and if that continued from the 11th month to the 12th month, if we had the same revenue next year that we had this year, we'd have $3 million more in this budget. And so that is a certainly large down payment towards a pool or anything else that might be a long-term consideration. And so, under normal circumstances, I would agree that that's far-fetched, but there may be opportunity if our local economy remains the way it is.
This is true.
So that's why I am trying to gently encourage us to think about things in that direction. You know, to Councilwoman Heeman's point, and I'm not trying to pick on recreation in specific, but there's at least $100,000 of new things, whether it's the new concerts, the expanded programming, that are there. And it does, at least for me, make me nervous to add new things without knowing what we're doing about our longer term problems. Now, $100,000 a year is not going to get us to a $10 million pool. You're correct there. And so I'm not looking to pick on little things to add up to that, but it's that's my discomfort. I had lingering questions about the new time clock and all the associated items with that, as to the value of what we were replacing and what we were gaining. That was a value proposition question we were going to explore further, and that is an outstanding item.
I have some more information on that, but
So,
you can take that out if you want and put it back in the permanent budget. I'm okay with that because I'm not allowed to work toward it toward the end of the year because of all the other stuff IT's doing. So if you wanna do that, that's fine.
Again, I'm not looking to be punitive, I'm looking
I understand where
to
you're
determine a process that works for everyone that we're all
Yeah.
on board with. So, and another smaller item that I had mentioned that perhaps creates more space is we currently are budgeting still a large amount for the overtime for the dispatch, which if we are operating under the assumption that we're expanding, adding a dispatcher who's also a supervisor, is that still the correct number? And so that's a smaller, but you know, that might be a $30,000 or $40,000.
I haven't gotten an answer from that yet, sorry.
And so, is that enough to address the Martin Bradley question?
Yeah.
Is it not? I have no idea.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I mean, as you're saying, I think that list is what we need to kind of build the scope around for, and how you wanna approach it is kind of up to council, but my thought is that these are items that we're flagging as needing more information, before, like, moving forward with the permanent budget. And then trying to set some reasonable scope for the administration to say, these are the items that we want to understand, so we're coming back throughout January, what about this and what about that? But through this saying, here are the things that we didn't feel comfortable with the answer or not clear of the full value, and whether we need to hold the temporary budget for that and for another meeting or so to get that down, or move forward with the temporary, but understand that that scope that is being evaluated as part of the permanent budget. I think that's kind of the approach I'm thinking. If the administration understands that approach and can work with that, that would be a way that we kind of added the scope of here's the items we can move forward with without having to carry the one like we did last year. I think of trying to make everything meet. It was a little bit of gymnastics. Like this gives that bucket, and then we can kind of work from there to make the numbers adjust. Plus, as we find out final revenue, some of that may become available, or we have to make harder decisions depending on how that goes. Being as conservative as you are, Carrie, I'm thinking it's going to be more of what else is available to fit in there versus having to pull something out. But like those would be the scope of items when we say a plus minus that we'd be able to talk about, or they'd be able to come up with a little bit better explanation of how that looks long term.
So would you like to have us move this tonight? Have us call a committee meeting with any additional changes prior to the 20th, or the night of the 20th, half an hour beforehand?
Yeah, I think we could probably do it before.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I mean, if that's the one that you're gonna are you passing it on the 20th, or are you gonna have another meeting? You can pass it on suspension, it's fine, on second reading, but I didn't know.
We have scheduling challenges amongst our various members, including me. I don't know what I was under the understanding we were targeting the 20th, but is that, I'm looking to our fearless president as to.
Remind me again, what are the scheduling conflicts? Because I don't have any, but I know that some others did.
I mean, I don't know, scheduled conflicts or not, like, I think we can look around the table. Did anything in here say, we can't address? I think we've articulated certain questions. I think you have those down on paper. I think some of them have been addressed. There's still some things out there. I think we've added some curveballs here tonight with some additional potential inputs. But to me, those are all things that could be worked out as part of the permanent budget. I don't think there was anything that was that drastic.
Skeptical,
Okay.
just saying.
So,
Mr. Chair, how big is your punch list of questions
Yes.
that still need resolved?
My questions are larger, personally speaking, are larger questions in terms of the things like the pool, which are not easy answers and are unlikely to be answered in full before December 20th or December 31st.
Okay.
But, you know, I don't know if there's a financial implication to Councilwoman Williamson's question about Burke Park Road or the Barton Bradley question. I know Mr. Kelly has a small question about a second police e-bike. I have a more parochial Ward 2 question about the Clay Park. The director said that the amount budgeted would not buy a swing, if we all remember. So I'd like to understand more and what amount wouldn't be needed to buy a swing set and all that. So there's not, to Mr. Limper's point, I don't think there are lots of specific nitty-gritty questions for us to go through, but there is, again, we have some big revenue questions as to what is really is the future, and we'll know more as we go along and get into the permanent budget. But there could be very big swings there.
May I?
Yes.
So, I guess a follow-up question would be, now that you've heard these short list of questions, is it reasonable to expect answers by, say, Saturday? We had a short finance meeting on Saturday as sort of a cleanup, and then we can, depending on what happens Saturday, we could, getting upside down from.
May I? Thank you. I think what the challenge is, right, it's much more a dynamic amongst ourselves rather than, you know, so far Council, the Chairperson Glassburn has been collecting information, I think, from each of us, and we've not had a roundtable discussion about any of that, right? So while we each have our thought and input, and some of them are major, we haven't come together to say, well, you know, how important is that really, and to whom, how many of us feel this way about this item or that item. So I think that's where the swing really can be big, right? You know, am I thinking like 10 million for a pool? Absolutely not. I have some very good ideas as to where to start if we had 2 or 3 million. And perhaps we do have that, or even a half, 1.5, right? Other smaller items, well, they're like the crosswalk or sidewalk or whatever you're looking at. On a comparative basis, that's a small item.
Right.
That if we piece together other pieces and parts, well, we've got that for you, we've got that, right? That's how I see this budget. And we've never had the privilege of doing that before because previous administration just sort of, you know, this is what I want, this is what we're getting, hands were raised and let's go. And I don't think that we've ever had the luxury to be able to have such a conversation like that in a swing in our finances. And it looks like Chair's done a phenomenal job at finding for us, you know, a high and a low, and it looks like that there may be the opportunity to have more money than we think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if we think we can meet and get some questions answered on our side to get that addressed, I'm fine with that. I'm just in a position, I think, where if we articulate what our concerns are for the temporary budget, we'll be able to work through those in time for the permanent budget appropriately, instead of trying to make the administration scramble around in a matter of a few days before the holidays, kind of moving numbers around and then find out that they didn't add right, and then we get an adjustment anyway, because we you know, it's a little hard to coordinate here right near the end with people leaving and stuff like that. So I'm perfectly happy for us to have a conversation to get our asks a little bit more aligned and rank ordered, so the administration has a little bit better guidance than, you know, this, that, and that, and it's 7 different people asking for one little thing. I'm perfectly happy doing that, whether we need to do that the meeting Saturday or whether we can work through the hub of the finance chair. Either way,
I'm in favor with the Councilman Lippert. I think we can work through our personal agendas, get them down, rank them, but not hold up the temporary budget. To see that go through on the 20th. I think we're all grown. We'll be able to work our own personal things out, get it done.
Any other thoughts from council? Okay, so we'll target one other meeting for us to add in any items that we want added into the temporary budget. That's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we close out tonight, is there anything anyone wants to bring up in terms of items that you've talked to me about, or you would like to discuss with, or bring up to anyone else? Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked briefly about a month ago about additional street lighting in neighborhoods that don't have it.
Mr. Chair, there's $20,000 in the street lighting line item in service. And they're like, what was it, $900? $900 a pole.
Oh, 50 with the,
Oh, you're scared.
Yes.
Hi.
Are you thinking more robust than 25 or so streetlights?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
but I mean, I know you were talking about a pole here and a pole there at one point, so.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Entire
entire
developments.
neighborhoods that don't have lighting, and they're surrounded by neighborhoods that do, and some of these neighborhoods that don't have them are dark, and they're cut-through streets where people are completely ignoring the 25 just to get from Canterbury to Dover quicker. So yeah, I think $20,000 could get used up rather quickly just for one street, maybe even, or a couple of streets in one neighborhood. So sorry to be a Debbie Downer on that, but
Is there like a plan for that? I mean,
I don't know.
are we looking at creating a plan for the street lighting?
So, Mr. Chairman, the service director and I had talked about this actually when the representative from First Energy came in to speak with us. And we, part of that discussion was, you know, if we as a city presented you, First Energy, with this plan and you know, sort of how to rank them. We asked if they had access to doing like a photo, I don't know the right word, but like a photo study of, you know, go up and take pictures, an aerial view of North Olmsted, so that what we're informing our decisions on, while I don't doubt the council president, you know, if he were to sit here and give us a list right now, I'm not saying I would doubt the streets that he would give us, but, you know, if we're going to present something such as an actual plan to First Energy, and, you know, this is what we want to tackle, I feel like we need to do that in a way that we have, you know, real numbers and real information to give them, not just anecdotal. So that was Mr. Carney and I's plan, was to move forward with that in '23 and see what we can do, again, insofar as a study. We were also having conversations about a possible study with the, you know, council. You had through the ARPA funding, you had allowed us to go out, and we are going to get like the when we look at the streets and the sidewalks, and it's going to be, so that was another opportunity. We were thinking, well, maybe if First Energy couldn't provide that study for us, we could use that, the piggyback off of that study and look at street lighting then as well.
I guess my only comment is I fully agree with having some sort of data support and not the resident complaining that their street's dark, because I've gone out to those on a few occasions, and you go to their street versus, as Mr. Broussard said, other areas where there's not a street light to be found, and they're complaining about how dark it is. I really think we need to have some, you know, factual data as opposed to the squeaky wheel that wants the light. So,
which Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, we have addressed this year as well, though.
yeah.
Mr. Scarl.
Thank you. in regards to Council President Broussard's comments, I totally agree, and I'll just speak on my ward. We used to be the councilman for that ward. It would be nice to have First Energy just take care of the poles that are out. We have so many in Ward 1 that are there, they're just, the bulbs are burned out. And I've been with Director Carney, and he's already addressed that with them. But if they could just, you know, there's one on the S-curve right on my street. People have gone over the yards, everything, because it's just the lights, the poles there, it's just burned out. And if we could address those issues, that would be a great start, and then we can start adding the poles where we need them.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Carney?
the $750 is only if the pole, there's an existing pole there to put a light on. It would be more if it put on this, I don't know if the President Streets he's talking about had pulled it, you know. And, there's 8 streets out, lights out on Lorraine, and we don't have enough money. The bulbs, the contractors there working on them now. They're pulling the bulb in, and there's no power to them, so we're in conversation with, the finance director, no, I'm saying if they rewrote it or if they disappeared, so we need more money.
What did I do with them?
Well, no, I think we talked to the finance director today about it. So the contractor's in town working on it.
Is that Perrin Electric?
That's west, and this west part that you've been talking about, and one over by, couple over by, on Great Northern Road by, John Knox Street, and I blame it all on Kerry Kaufman.
Mr. Broussard?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow, I wanna make sure I understood Mr. Service Director Carney correctly. So the $700 figure is for putting a light on an existing
Like a telephone pole or some pole that's already on the street,
Okay.
in the tree line.
Do you happen to know the figure for, because, you know, the streets I'm referencing, all the poles are in the backyard, so there are no poles on the
I'll
street.
have a price for you tomorrow morning, time,
Okay, thank you.
and I'll get it to be in Beacon for
9 o'clock.
I'll have it to be by 9 o'clock, I don't know when she'll get it to you guys. Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Are any other items that anyone would like to bring up before we close the meeting? To your colleagues to pitch them on.
So, Mr. Chair, just so I'm clear.
Yep.
The changes that you see before you, plus what we discussed tonight as far as when you were talking to the directors tonight, those are the changes that are gonna be made. And then, are there other items that you want to take out of the temporary and revisit them in the permanent? And if so, I need a list of those.
I think that's what we're trying to have finalized on Saturday,
Okay,
if I'm following everyone's wishes.
do you want me to come to the meeting on Saturday as well, or do you wanna just
This will be online.
discuss amongst yourselves?
Yeah, that's no problem.
I don't know.
Yeah,
Was not planning
I
to do
wasn't
this on
either,
Saturday.
yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I mean,
So
do you think that
It'll be
it
virtual.
has to be on Saturday, or could
Yeah.
you possibly do it on Tuesday before, like, I guess I'm wondering how,
But then the
how
ordinance would
much?
have to be ready to be passed that night.
Yeah.
That's the
How
problem.
how far in advance do we have to announce this?
48 hours.
Can we do Thursday?
24.
24?
Clerk must have all.
For committee meetings, 24 hours.
Can we do Thursday? Cause this is our stuff, like that would give them more time
For you for
to,
general,
unless
council,
everyone
regular
works on
council.
Saturday,
Thursday evening.
Thursday evening, anytime.
That's
9 o'clock.
harder to do, especially if it's already been
Yeah,
Because I work.
yeah,
Okay.
9 or 9:30, anytime.
Thursday night?
Right.
Yeah. Correct, Mr. Glassberg.
If it's at 9:30.
Does a late night Thursday work instead of having to coordinate Saturday? That'd be far enough in advance that we could have it. Let's go
I'll
Chris's
consult my
request.
phone to try to determine the answers to that.
Okay,
It's like the Ouija board.
yes.
Yeah.
Looking possible. No? You got Thursday?
I have to qualify, handgun Thursday night,
Until when?
could be at least till 9 o'clock, I would think.
said.
Oh, you don't do it on the first try?
Unfortunately, I got 5 other guys I gotta make sure get qualified.
Oh, okay.
before.
Sure.
I mean, this is.
I mean,
I passed on my first try, I mean, you
I'm
know.
fine with
Is that to be a county councilman?
9:30.
That's not for my job.
What's that? Your other one meets Saturday.
I apologize, I'm trying to look at my agenda.
But, Mr. Chair, while you're doing that, can I indulge
Please.
the group? Okay, so, you promoted this as an opportunity to push this idea to colleagues.
Yep.
I first approached council with this, in 2007. So if Michael Garreau were here, he was a city council member at that time. And after the meeting, a couple of council members said, you should think about getting involved with the city. And the reason careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
But, so I've literally been waiting for my spot for 15 years because the prior administration had no interest in considering it whatsoever. But yeah, 2007, when I was the HOA president at that time.
For street lighting? For street lighting, you mean?
For street lighting, yeah.
Well, Mayor Musio was all about street lighting. Should've been there earlier.
Yeah, he got it in his neighborhood, but nobody else's.
Well, right, yeah.
Well, and
His
some,
guys.
were some of those developments built with like those little lamp posts that,
The lamp
like
was
nothing,
on, yeah.
but they look cute during the day, is that what's, yeah.
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 Well, the previous program, as I understood it, was that, the electric company actually paid for the equipment, and then we paid for the bill, the electricity.
Well, I'm all for more street lighting, it's just, yeah.
We do pay for the electricity though.
Well, sure, but the program, were you
Getting that
around?
point.
The program,
Yeah, they put in the poles for us.
they put in polls
Right.
for no charge,
Right,
Yell there.
that's true.
so.
Okay, that's better.
I can do either. I can do Thursday evening or Saturday, whatever we need to do.
You know, I have appointments on Saturday because I thought we'd be doing
Yeah,
this stuff,
I
so,
understand.
I mean, I've got like back-to-back stuff, it's
Yeah.
not like just one.
Right.
meeting.
I have some plans as well.
Thursday's good.
Let's do Thursday
All right.
evening, and even if somebody, we could even potentially start it earlier to get started and we could dial in at 9. So
Okay.
like, if it would seem at like 8:30.
No, I'm not starting a meeting at 8:30. But you guys can, that's fine.
Well, what time is your cutoff for a Thursday meeting?
You know, I'm up at 5, does anybody wanna do that? I
It's on a
mean,
Thursday night.
I'm fine with that too.
No,
5
but I'm
a.m.,
saying,
yeah.
like, what's happened to 6 and 7 o'clock kind of stuff, what are we doing?
Well, there's some conflicts here, so we're
Okay.
trying to accommodate the conflicts to get everybody involved.
Okay, well, then you go ahead and do that.
Okay, well, we'll look for Thursday evening. I will reach out to Ms. Williamson to find out if there's a time that is better for her as well. And we'll go for Thursday evening later. Okay?
You can always jump in after work too. So if I have to be a little late.
Alright. Anything further for this evening? Okay, we will end the hearing at 9:04 p.m.